What happens when the CEO of a buffet chain scrubs the floor and sees an employee quietly crying behind the dessert station? Ishaan O'Connor had 9 locations under his name, a buffet chain he'd built from a single self-serve barbecue shack 15 years ago. Now, it was a known name across 3 states. But lately, something felt off. He was sitting in his office above the flagship location when one of the monthly customer reports caught his eye. The numbers at Store 6 in Mason, Illinois, were all over the place. Sales were down, but foot traffic wasn't. Customer reviews mentioned rude service, long waits, cold food. But what really struck him was the sudden spike in employee turnover. 5 people had quit in a single month. He had never personally visited that store. It had opened during the expansion push 2 years ago, and he'd relied on his district manager, Vince, to run it. Vince always said it was running smooth, but Ishaan wasn't convinced anymore, so he made a decision. He called in a favor from a makeup artist friend in Chicago and had a disguise made shorter haircut, fake tattoos on his arms, a thick beard, and a name tag that read Illy. He wore a loose black uniform polo and khakis and introduced himself as a new trainee from a temp agency they had just partnered with. Since most of the staff had never seen his face, especially in this smaller, newer location, no one questioned it. He arrived at Store 6 on a Wednesday morning. The building looked clean enough from the outside, but the inside was another story. Sticky floors, streaked sneeze guards, and a sour smell near the soup station. "New temp?" a thin man with greasy glasses asked, barely looking up from a clipboard. "Yeah, Ali, reporting for shift training." "That's fine. We're short-staffed anyway," the man muttered. "I'm Craig, manager." "Just do what you're told, stay out of the way. You mop?" "Sure," Ishaan nodded. Craig pointed to a yellow cart with a half-filled bucket. "Start with the buffet line and don't block the soda machines. People complain." Ishaan grabbed the mop and got to work. The floor hadn't been properly cleaned in weeks. He pushed grime and sticky patches across the tile, trying to keep pace with the lunch rush. He saw a teenage girl at the salad bar, nervously adjusting trays. A line cook muttered curses every time he had to refill the chicken. Craig barked orders from the back, loud and impatient. Around noon, a woman in her early 20s came out from the kitchen with a tray of refilled mashed potatoes. She moved quickly, quietly. Her name tag read Elena. She nodded politely at Ishaan as she passed. "Elena," Craig shouted from the side. She flinched. "Yes, you left the damn gravy spoon in the sink again. How many times do I have to say it? I'm not your babysitter." Sorry, I didn't mean, don't talk, just fix it. "Or I'll find someone else who knows how to do their job." Elena nodded, her eyes dropped to the floor. She disappeared into the back. Ishaan kept mopping, but his eyes followed her every chance he got. 10 minutes later, she came back out, this time to wipe down the dessert station. Her movements were slower now, more careful. Then he saw it. As she bent behind the counter to grab a cloth, her shoulders trembled. She didn't make a sound, didn't call attention to herself. But tears rolled down her cheeks. She wiped them quickly and kept working. Ishaan froze. He looked around. Customers passed by with plates. Craig was barking at the dishwasher now. No one noticed Elena. No one cared. He leaned his mop against the wall and walked quietly over to her. "Hey," he said softly, crouching near her. "You okay?" Elena flinched and wiped her face with her sleeve. Yeah, I'm fine. You sure? You're kinda crying." She looked at him, startled. "It's nothing, just tired," he nodded. "I get that." They stood in silence for a few seconds. Then she said, "It's just, he does that a lot. I try not to mess up, but he finds something anyway." Ishaan looked toward the back, where Craig had now moved on to yelling at the teen girl in the front. "Has anyone said anything?" She gave a sad half-laugh. "To who?" Ishaan nodded slowly. "Right. That night he stayed through closing." Craig left early, claiming he'd done enough for one day. Elena and 2 others were left to clean the entire place. Ishaan stayed to help. He scrubbed pans. He wiped down trays. He even fixed the broken salsa dispenser no one else had bothered to touch. When they locked up, Elena smiled faintly. Thanks for helping. Most people don't. Ishaan smiled back. Maybe they should. He walked back to his motel with his hands raw and his back aching and his heart burning. He had seen enough for one day, but it wasn't over, not yet. By Thursday morning, Ishaan had made his decision he'd stay embedded at Store 6 for the full week. He needed a complete picture, not just fragments. What he'd seen the day before couldn't be ignored, but it also couldn't be acted on without understanding the full scope. When he arrived just after 7, the front doors were still locked. The parking lot was empty except for 3 other cars. Through the side windows, he saw movement, someone stocking napkin dispensers near the drink station. He knocked twice on the back door. After a few seconds, it opened. "You again?" It was the dishwasher from the night before, a heavy-set man in his 50s. "Didn't think temps came back. I was told to be here at 7. "Yeah, all right," the man muttered. "Kitchen's already behind. They'll throw you on prep." Ishaan stepped inside. The air was thick with grease and steam. The kitchen felt 10 degrees hotter than the lobby. 3 people were working, each moving fast but in silence. A young man with a sleeve of burn scars chopped vegetables at a metal table. A middle-aged woman with a limp stirred a giant pot of soup. No one spoke unless necessary. The cook in charge, a tall woman with cropped hair and a sleeve tattoo, pointed at Ishaan. "You know how to portion?" she asked, not breaking her rhythm. "Yeah, good. Start with the cornbread. Gloves are on the shelf. Label everything." He nodded and got to work. The cornbread tubs were still warm. He counted out slices into containers, taped labels, and stacked them into the warmer. No one said much, but the pace was relentless. No breaks, no wasted motion. He noticed something else: none of the clocks in the kitchen worked. Not a single one. He checked his watch. It was just past 8. At 8:15, Craig burst through the back door, already talking. "Where's the damn eggs? Prep's not done. What are you all doing back here, sleeping?" The woman at the stove didn't even look up. "You said brunch was delayed till 10. Craig ignored her. "I need someone out front. We're down again. Who's covering drinks?" No one answered. After a few seconds, he pointed at Ishaan. "You, mop boy, you're on drinks." Ishaan wiped his hands and followed him out. The lobby was half lit. A family of 4 waited by the door, looking confused. Craig barely glanced at them. "We open in 15, he barked, then turned to Ishaan. "Clean the machine. Make sure the nozzles don't stick. Last week, some lady said her Sprite tasted like gravy." Craig walked off, muttering into his earpiece. Ishaan got to work. The drink machine was sticky with dried soda. He removed the nozzles and cleaned them one by one. The syrup lines were misaligned. One of the levers jammed halfway down. It was obvious no one had done regular maintenance. As customers began trickling in, the tension in the room shifted. The cashier, a girl with braces and a red stain on her collar, tried to keep pace, but her register kept freezing. A customer asked for change, and she had to call Craig 3 times before he responded. He came out, slammed open the drawer, shoved coins at her, and left without saying a word. By 10:30, the line for food reached the door. Ishaan worked the drinks, keeping the station clean and helping guests when needed. An elderly man dropped his cup, and Ishaan knelt to clean it immediately. The man smiled and said, "Thank you, son. I wish more folks here had your manners." At 11, Craig pulled Ishaan aside near the ice cream freezer. "You're not useless, I'll give you that," he said, "but don't get too helpful." "You're not management." "I thought we were supposed to help wherever needed." Craig narrowed his eyes. "You're a temp. Temps don't take initiative, they follow orders. That's how things work here." Ishaan didn't respond. Craig walked off, adjusting his jacket collar like he was preparing for a photo shoot. By lunch rush, the buffet line was chaos. Half the trays were empty. Customers complained about missing labels and cold entrees. Elena moved between stations, trying to refill what she could. Her face was flushed, her sleeves damp from carrying pans. "You need help with the trays?" Ishaan asked, approaching her as she struggled with a pan of scalloped potatoes. She shook her head. "No, I'm fine. I just need to get these out." "You don't have to do it all alone." She looked around before whispering, "If Craig sees you helping me, he'll say I'm making people do my job." He didn't push it. At noon, a customer raised their voice near the carving station. Ishaan heard the words clearly. "Why is the meat guy wearing gloves but also touching the trash can?" Craig appeared seconds later and waved the customer off. "It's clean back there. You want a refund or not?" he snapped. The customer shook her head in disbelief and left without her food. Ishaan stood frozen. He glanced behind the station. The employee in question, a skinny boy with dyed orange hair, was indeed wiping his hands on his apron after tossing a full trash bag against the wall. Craig didn't reprimand him. He didn't even acknowledge the issue. Later, as Ishaan stocked napkins, he overheard a conversation behind the kitchen door. "Can you cover Friday?" a voice asked. "I already have double Saturday," another replied. "I know, but if I don't get Friday off, I'll miss my court date. Talk to Craig." He said court's not a good enough excuse. Ishaan clenched his fists. He walked away before they saw him listening. By two, the crowd had thinned. Ishaan was wiping down tables near the corner window when he noticed Elena again. She was at the dessert station, refilling the pudding tray. Her hands trembled slightly. He approached slowly. "You've been on your feet all day," she shrugged. "It's always like this. How long you been working here?" 7 months, he paused. "Do you get breaks?" "Technically, yeah, but only if Craig lets us. He says it depends on how behind we are." "You ever had a full 30 minutes?" She shook her head. Before he could respond, a loud crash echoed from the back. A tray of metal lids had fallen. The boy with orange hair stood over them, looking panicked. Craig came storming through. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted. "Do you have brains in that head or just garbage?" The boy muttered something under his breath. Craig stepped in close. "Say that again." The room went quiet. "I said sorry," the boy said, barely audible. Craig didn't move for a second. Then he turned and kicked one of the lids across the floor. It bounced against the wall. "Clean it up. And if I hear another word, you're gone." The boy picked up a lid with shaking hands. Ishaan had seen enough. At closing, he requested a meeting with Craig. "Got something to say?" Craig leaned against the front counter, arms crossed, chewing gum with his mouth open. "Yeah, I do." Ishaan pulled the name tag off his shirt. Craig stared. "I'm Ishaan O'Connor. I own this company." The gum fell out of Craig's mouth. "I went undercover because I was tired of hearing excuses from district reports. What I saw here, it's not just mismanagement, it's abuse." Craig opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "You berate employees, you ignore safety, you play favorites. And you let loyal team members burn out while you stand around barking orders." Craig began. "You're done, effective immediately." Craig's face turned red, then pale. He turned without a word and walked toward the office, shaking. Ishaan turned to the remaining staff who had gathered at a distance. He looked at Elena. "You're not invisible, none of you are," she nodded, eyes wide. "We're making changes," he said. "Starting now," and he meant it. The following morning, Ishaan arrived before sunrise. He unlocked the back door with the spare key Craig had carelessly left behind in the office drawer. The kitchen lights flickered on with a low buzz. He stood in the middle of the prep area for a moment, listening to the silence. No shouting, no slamming trays. Just the hum of refrigeration units and the faint rattle of the ceiling vent. A few minutes later, the prep cook with burned scars entered, blinking at the bright light. "You're here early," he said, setting down his backpack. "I figured I'd start the day right," Ishaan replied. "You got a minute?" The man nodded cautiously. "I'm Ishaan O'Connor. I own the company. I've been here this week undercover." The man's eyes widened, but he didn't say anything. "You don't need to be nervous. You've been solid. I noticed your pace, your consistency. You're one of the reasons this place hasn't completely collapsed." The man let out a half laugh, unsure whether to be relieved or stunned. "Name's Julian," he finally offered. "Didn't know the owner knew how to wrap foil." Ishaan chuckled. "I know more than I let on." Julian glanced toward the pantry. "So what happens now? We're keeping the store open, but things are changing starting today." By 8, the rest of the morning crew had trickled in. Elena came in last, pulling her hoodie tight around her shoulders. "Morning," Ishaan said. She nodded, eyes wary but curious. "I need everyone in the break room in 10 minutes, he said loud enough for the kitchen to hear. By 8:15, 7 employees sat around the scratched plastic table, most of them unsure where to look. The girl from the register tapped her fingers against a juice bottle. The dishwasher leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Elena sat near the edge of the room, hands folded in her lap. Ishaan stood at the front. "I'm not here to give a speech," he said. "I'm here to listen. What we've seen this week is unacceptable. You've all been working under conditions that no one should tolerate: short staffing, no breaks, disrespect, even verbal abuse." No one spoke, but several heads dropped. "That ends now. Craig is no longer with the company. He won't be returning. We're bringing in an interim operations lead until a new general manager is hired." A soft exhale traveled through the group. "But before we move forward, I need to hear from you, not just complaint solutions. What do you need to do this job without burning out or breaking down?" The cashier raised her hands slightly. "We need someone who actually trains new hires. Right now, people get thrown into the line with no idea what they're doing, then they quit." Ishaan nodded. "Training structure." "Got it." Julian spoke next. "We need working timers and thermometers. Half the kitchen stuff is either broken or held together with duct tape." The dishwasher added, "And we need to stop being the cleanup crew for management's mistakes. Craig used to cut shifts last minute, then guilt trip us into staying longer." Elena hesitated, then said quietly, "If someone's having a hard day, maybe we don't assume they're lazy, we check in first." Ishaan folded his arms. "Let me make something clear. No one here is going to be punished for telling the truth. That culture is gone, but change isn't a speech, it's a process. It's going to take time and effort from everyone." One of the line cooks, a woman who had stayed silent until then, spoke up. "It's hard to care about food quality when no one cares about us." Ishaan met her gaze. "That's on me. I let distance become blindness. I won't let that happen again." The meeting ended quietly, but the air felt different, not hopeful yet, but lighter. By noon, customers began arriving. Ishaan stayed on the floor not as an owner, but as backup. He helped refill trays, cleared tables, and fixed a syrup dispenser that had been leaking behind the drinks. At the carving station, the employee with dyed hair Ben moved cautiously, eyes flicking toward Ishaan every now and then. Ishaan finally approached between rushes. "You're Ben, right?" "Yeah. I saw what happened yesterday. That wasn't your fault. But I have to ask, was anyone ever trained on food safety back here?" Ben shook his head. "Craig just said keep it full and don't waste the ends. Starting tomorrow, you'll get proper training. Gloves, temperature checks, full procedure." Ben nodded, his shoulders relaxing slightly. Around 2, Ishaan pulled Elena aside near the supply closet. "Can I ask you something off the record?" She looked uncertain but nodded. "Why did you stay? You had every reason to walk away." She hesitated. "I send money home. My family's back in Romania, my brother's in school, this job." It kept things going. Ishaan's expression didn't change, but something in his voice softened. "You shouldn't have to trade dignity for income." Elena shrugged. "I didn't think anyone would notice either way." "Well, I did." He pulled a folded sheet from his pocket and handed it to her. "What's this?" she asked. "Schedule review. Starting next week, you're moving to a supervisory role, same hours, higher pay. I want you to help train the new hires. You're one of the few people here who actually leads by example." Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She looked at the paper, then back at him. "Thank you," she whispered. "You earned it." That afternoon, Ishaan met with the district operations coordinator, a no-nonsense woman named Hannah who had driven in from Springfield. He laid it out plainly. "We're implementing a zero-tolerance policy on employee mistreatment. If a manager even raises their voice inappropriately, they're out." "Understood," Hannah said, flipping through her notes. "You want me to oversee the transition personally? Only if you're willing to be in the building. At least 2 days a week." "I'll make it 3," she replied. Ishaan looked out at the dining room through the office window. Customers were eating quietly. A toddler laughed as her mother handed her a green gelatin cube from the dessert bar. "Let's get this place back to what it was meant to be," he said. That evening, as the shift wound down, Ishaan stayed behind to wipe down the steam tables. Elena passed by on her way out, coat slung over one shoulder. She paused. "Can I ask one more thing?" "Sure. Are you going to do this at the other stores?" He looked up. "Yes," he said. "Every single one." She smiled, not out of politeness, but something real. "Good." She walked out into the night. Ishaan turned back to the line, rolled up his sleeves, and kept wiping. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. By the following Tuesday, Store 6 looked the same from the outside: aged signage, faded trim on the windows, but inside, the rhythm was shifting. The changes weren't sweeping or dramatic. They were deliberate, measured, logical. Ishaan returned for a follow-up visit, this time as himself. He didn't wear a corporate suit or arrive with fanfare, just a plain button-down, sleeves rolled, and a notepad in his pocket. As he stepped through the kitchen entrance, Julian was setting up prep bowls, focused but noticeably less tense. "You're back earlier than I thought," he said without pausing his slicing. "Wanted to see how things were holding up." "Hannah said she'd be by later in the week, but I'd rather hear it straight." Julian wiped his hands and nodded toward the storage rack. "We finally got the new timers and thermometers. They showed up yesterday." Ishaan scanned the shelf. "Good. You using the new prep logs every shift?" "Feels weird actually writing things down again." "You think it's helping?" Julian shrugged. "It's at least making people pay attention." Out in the dining area, the lunch crowd was building slowly. Elena stood near the hot bar, not running back and forth, but overseeing. She had a clipboard tucked under her arm and a headset clipped to her collar. She wasn't giving orders, she was walking line with a new hire, pointing out placement and pacing. Ishaan waited until she wrapped up before approaching. "You're adapting fast." Elena smiled faintly. "I'm still learning." "But it's different when people ask you to lead instead of leaving you to fix things alone." He nodded. "That's a fair point. Ben's been showing the new girl how to rotate the carving station. He's actually trying." Ishaan glanced toward the front, where Ben stood a few feet back from the counter, demonstrating how to wrap leftovers without cross-contaminating the prep surface. "Noticed anything we've missed?" he asked. Elena glanced around before answering. "We still run tight during peak hours. Not enough bodies to float between stations. It's better, but we're stretched thin when someone calls out." "I'm working on that," he said. "We're hiring, but I won't throw in anyone untrained. I'd rather rotate support from the regional team until we stabilize." She nodded once. "Fair." Near the hostess stand, a young woman named Dana, one of the newest hires, was struggling with the register. She keyed in a coupon incorrectly, then tried to void the transaction, her hands fumbling. Ishaan moved toward her, but before he could intervene, the girl from last week who'd struggled under Craig's constant pressure stepped up beside Dana. "Here," she said gently. "You press subtotal, then hit the promo key. It won't cancel unless you do it in that order." Dana looked relieved. "Thanks, I thought I broke it." "You're fine. It's weird at first." Ishaan leaned against the wall for a moment, watching. He didn't interrupt. That kind of peer support wasn't something you could mandate, it had to be earned. He walked back into the kitchen and found Hannah waiting near the dry storage area, clipboard in hand. "We're at 70% of full staffing," she said without preamble. 2 more part-time hires starting next week. "Training's staggered, but we're using the revised checklist. Any signs of backsliding?" "No, but old habits don't die in a week. Yesterday I had to remind someone that ignoring a timer isn't a shortcut, it's a liability." He nodded. "Keep pressing on it." Quiet erosion is the first sign of return to dysfunction. She flipped a page. "Also, I reviewed the old scheduling records. Craig was routinely logging fake break times to meet compliance. That's being submitted to HR. We'll audit the other stores in his region." "Good," Ishaan said. "If anything else surfaces, anything at all, I want to know immediately." They walked through the back hallway together. A faint, steady rhythm of pans being washed echoed from the dish pit. The dishwasher, a man who'd once slumped through his shift with silent resentment, now worked with headphones in, humming softly to himself. "Can I ask something?" Hannah said, pausing. "Go ahead. You're planning to do this store by store go undercover again, not exactly." That was a wake-up call, but I can't clone myself. What I can do is build a system where silence isn't the default, where people don't have to wait for someone like me to show up before they're treated like they matter. She nodded slowly. Then we'll need to overhaul more than just staffing. Reporting, feedback systems, internal escalation. I've already drafted the framework, he said. Anonymous reporting directly to regional HR, monthly pulse surveys. And every GM will be required to spend 2 shifts a month on the floor, working beside their team. That'll ruffle some feathers. Then let them ruffle. Out in the dining room, a man in a worn flannel shirt waved over Elena. "Is this banana pudding homemade?" he asked. She smiled. "It's made fresh here, yes. Would you like to try a sample before committing?" he chuckled. "You know, I haven't heard someone say that in a restaurant in years." "Then it's about time," she replied, handing him a small cup. Ishaan watched from a distance. She hadn't been trained on customer engagement. That was instinct. She was choosing to connect. Later that afternoon, he gathered the team in the break room once more, not for a lecture, but to mark a transition. This location's been through the worst of what happens when leadership forgets its purpose. I can't undo what happened here, and I won't pretend a policy change fixes everything. But I can promise this, no one here will go unseen again. He paused. You've all carried more than your share. Now it's time to build something that can carry you too. There was no applause, no dramatic music, just a quiet kind of understanding. As the team dispersed, Julian stayed behind, packing up deli containers for next day's prep. "You're not like the others," he said finally. Ishaan raised an eyebrow. Owners, executives, they show up when something's broken, throw out a few buzzwords, then vanish. "I'm not disappearing," Ishaan said. "But I'm also not staying in your pocket. You don't need someone watching every move. You need a system you can trust." "That's what we're building." Julian nodded once and went back to labeling sauces. As Ishaan walked out the front door, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows against the parking lot. A mother held the door open for her young son, who was clutching a balloon from the front counter. A teenager behind them wiped down the entry mat with care. None of it was perfect. The tables weren't all even. The menu still needed refinement, but the air had changed, not lighter, not louder, just honest, and that was enough for now.